teen court. It's very effective. Justice doesn't work so well in high school, but teen court does. And safety is a big issue in schools, particularly in Santa Rosa, because we've seen all the things that's happened down there, and it continues to get worse. It's not getting better. And so it needs to take a look at some of those things. I fight for what I believe is right. I've done that as Republican in the CTA organization for 20 years. I actually received a state WHO award from the CTA for my union work over 20 years. And so I'm sure as we go on, we'll be having some different questions about education and so forth, but I'm hoping that this time we can talk a little bit more about education, a little bit more about the economy, a little bit more about the cost of living, how it's rising so fast, particularly in the Santa Rosa area, where every tax that they put in raises the price of the homes. Just like the taxes are going to do, they're going to raise permit fees, okay? That my opponent put on the ballot, the city council, that's going to raise those costs to the homeowners. It's not going to make it less expensive, it's going to make it more expensive.
Thank you, both of you. Let's jump into our first question. This question comes from Kevin Evans. Kevin is the president of the Gualala Community Center. Here's Kevin's question. The Mendocino coast experienced catastrophic damage during the last 2 winters due to downed trees, mudslides, flooding, and extended power outages. In January 2023, the power outage lasted over 10 days, but the community center was one of the key facilities that was used to provide services for displaced residents. Then in February 2023, the community center was destroyed by arson. We, meaning the Gualala Community Center, are raising funds in the community to rebuild this vital community resource, but we could use state assistance similar to the $2.2 million Assemblyman Jim Wood secured for Gualala's Bower Park. If elected, what would you do to help secure funding to rebuild our community center and provide a crucial alternative facility to serve as an evacuation site during catastrophic events? Since we went before, Mike, let me give you the answer, and 1-minute answers to each of these.
Well, actually, to me, it's very important. You talked about the 10 days you didn't have electricity down here up in Dale North. We were down for over 2 weeks because we don't have an infrastructure up here that we can bring power from Oregon into Dale North County. Our schools served as that community center for feeding people. We supported the police department, the fire departments, because they did not have the infrastructure up there that they could do it. So our generators were actually there and so working so that we can take care of those things. It's essential that a community like this that is so isolated has those facilities. And that's one of the biggest problems we have, is that we don't have all these facilities. So it doesn't matter if it's here, it doesn't matter if it's in Shelter Cove, you know, all up and down the coast we see the same type of thing. One of the ways you go about doing it is you make it an emergency center. By establishing that as an emergency center, there are more funds available in order to go ahead and achieve that goal of rebuilding, because it needs to be there. There's no question about it. You need to have something here to help the people, whether it's medically, whether it doesn't make any difference. You need to have a center here that you can go to, you know, and communicate with everybody, whatever it might be with it. So I was certainly back doing that, and I do it through the simple fact that emergency funds that are available for the community centers.
Thank you, Mike. It's your minute. Chris, will you take 1 minute also?
Yeah, absolutely. Kevin, thank you so much for the question. I think when you and I last talked about it, you were looking at a $7 million price tag for the rebuild. But I think at the time you had $2 million in sort of state or other types of assistance that had come in, and then $3 million in private donations that folks had brought in as well. So really helping you to close that $2 million gap is the question. I think that there are a lot of funds that are out there right now, whether through the Inflation Reduction Act or the Jobs and Infrastructure Act that were passed in Congress. And really what's special about what you've already built here is that many of those pots of funds really prioritize projects that have what are called self-help capabilities, where they've already raised some funds to be able to leverage. The other thing is that they like last dollars in the door. There's nothing more that the federal government loves than to give money where they can come out and cut a ribbon because their dollars were the ones that pushed it over the finish line, right? The challenge that you have and many communities in this district have is that there's very little staff to be able to write those grants, and there's even less staff to be able to manage those grants, which is something that if we win in November, our office could definitely help with, is to help make sure that folks see what's available, that they get the support letters that they know, that you bring people together to actually support the applications, because those funds are out there and you're doing the work to be able to put yourself in a position to get them.
Thank you.
Hi, the next question is from the Redwood Coast Recreation Center. The Mindanoma community is often forgotten and left to fend for itself despite our significant contributions to tourism, real estate, and taxes, leaving large gaps in basic community infrastructure that we struggle to fill ourselves through numerous nonprofits. Redwood Coast Recreation Center has been fundraising for more than 2 decades to build a large open-air pavilion on our property, Ocean Ridge Park. No such facility is accessible within a 1.5 to 2 hour drive radius, leaving a significant gap in outdoor resources for families to support physical and mental health with outdoor recreation and community building activities. The RCRC has repeatedly applied and been rejected for Cal Park grants. What would you do as our representative to secure funding for our local nonprofits such as RCRC? And Chris, you're first on this one.
Yeah, so it's a similar problem where a one-size-fits-all approach from Sacramento means that many places on the North Coast are left out, whether it's because the grants don't actually fit what we are trying to accomplish, or you don't have the staff to actually apply and administer the grants or report on the grants after the fact. Making sure that you support these grants is important as a legislator, but more importantly, when you're crafting the legislation, to make sure that the requirements actually match the community that you're trying to serve. So that means understanding how the population demographics are going to be impacted by the local project, so that in the language that actually authorizes the funding, it recognizes that, so that those dollars don't just get siphoned off by San Francisco or San Diego or San Jose, places that already have more resources and also have a lot of need as well. Making sure that you build the partnerships in the legislature with other members to literally have the language benefit the district that you are trying to serve. And that's difficult when you have one representative for 5 counties in rural areas like this district, and you have 27 members for LA County. That means being able to build those relationships to talk about how do we help my people to make sure that you also in Southern California get what you need around issues as well. I've done that before. I've worked with my colleagues in the Santa Rosa and in Sonoma County to make sure that everybody gets what they need and that we support one another.
Thank you. Mike?
Chris is absolutely right. He has worked very hard with that in Santa Rosa, and that's part of the reason you don't get it here, because all that money goes to the bigger cities, and Santa Rosa is part of that, the Greater Bay Area. And so he makes sure that that money goes to where, certain projects there. It's not so much here. We're hearing the same thing year after year. Okay, so yes, we'll come out and help. Can I promise you this is what I'm going to do? Absolutely not. You can't promise something that's not there. It's just like on the East Coast with the hurricane. They've been promised to have all this aid from the federal government. It doesn't happen. It's not happening. Chances of getting things from the federal government are slimmer and slimmer for smaller communities because they're dealing with the bigger cities. They're taking extra money and put it into the homeless population instead of doing some type of a facility up here. And this is what we're seeing. We're seeing that a lot of that money that's going out, the billions and billions of dollars, whether it's for mental health, whether it's for education, wherever it's going, is going to places that it's not being used appropriately. We see that the governor refused to sign the bill to hold the state accountable for its money. They don't want to do it. They don't want to check it. They can go ahead and check 3 different agencies a year. It's going to take a while to get through, but at least some accountability. We don't see that here. They're having some of the same issues in Santa Rosa. They're having some of the same issues in the county for it. I'm sure you've seen a lot of different things going on. So I can't promise what I can do, but I certainly look into it and work as best I can.
Thank you. This next question is from Charles Higgins, President of Friends of the Coast Community Library. This is an important question for me. I love libraries. The American Library Association has documented the increase nationwide in attempts to restrict the availability of books in public and school libraries. Challenges to books have become highly contentious. Educators and librarians have been harassed for the choices they make in book selection. What are your views on libraries making available books for young people that treat issues of sexuality, gender identity, racism, and the history of race relations in this country? Would you consider removing books from libraries for treating these topics? Do you believe that librarians and educators should be protected from dismissal or other sanctions for selecting controversial books? And you're first on this one, Mike.
Same thing as I said last time. I do not believe in banning books. I have a personal library of over 1,500 volumes in my house. What I do approve of too, though, is those books should be for appropriate audiences. Some of the books in high school certainly aren't good for third graders. You need to take a look at that. You're right that it's becoming a huge issue because of transparency of what's going on. We don't need to ban the books, but I think that the parents should have a say-so on what books, their kids take a look at. Parents should be able to go in and say, okay, this is a book we're doing. Come and take a look at it, see what you say. But I do not believe in banning books. And that's what it really comes down to. And I think that people that threaten, whether it's teachers, whether it's library, I think that's wrong. Okay, there is a method to go ahead and do it so that you can have the books, don't ban them, but where parents can have that transparency, where parents can have that final say-so how they want to raise their children.
Chris?
Yeah, no, I don't believe in banning books, and I think that people who really make a vendetta to ban books have way too much time on their hands when there are bigger issues that they should be worried about. I'm a big supporter of libraries. I actually was just at the kickoff for Measure W, which is the reauthorization of Measure Y, which supported libraries in Sonoma County to make sure that folks have access everywhere in the county, that people have access. That's part of why the online library was able to be as successful as it has been. I was up in Trinity County in Weaverville a couple of weeks ago, and one of the ways that the Board of Supervisors has been considering balancing their budget was to close their only library as well as their animal services. And I was talking to a family that had just moved up to the area during the pandemic from the East Bay, who was just apoplectic, thinking that they are about to have an area where their kids won't have access to the same level of education as elsewhere in the state. I think we need to support libraries. It's an equity issue. It's an economic development issue. And of course, don't ban books. Just because you don't like something doesn't mean that you should ban people from being able to do it.
Thanks. Our next question is from Bonnie Plakos, who is the chief of our local North Sonoma Coast Fire District. AT&T attempted to be relieved of its responsibility to be the carrier of last resort. That means continuing landline phones. The CPUC rejected this request, however, in June, but we can anticipate future attempts to stop supporting that landline service. There's many areas in our district where people depend on physical phone lines because there's not good cell service, nor is there broadband. In times of power outages without landlines, many people would have no ability to call for help. How will you advocate to make sure that reliable emergency communications channels are provided for all residents, especially in rural areas? Chris, I think you're next. You'll start, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was happy to oppose that when AT&T was bringing that forward before the CPUC. We know, especially in this district, not only is there a lack of accessibility, there's a lack of redundancy as well. You've seen multiple instances where a single car crash takes out the entire ability for people to do local commerce because they have no access to redundant lines, whether it's for their phones or for their internet. We need a broader push for better investment in infrastructure everywhere on the North Coast. And certainly last week with Verizon having their whole cell network go down for a certain amount of time highlighted the challenges elsewhere that we run into on the North Coast. PG&E needs to be held accountable, or excuse me, we'll get to that question. AT&T needs to be held accountable, that they have an obligation and a responsibility to these communities, not just to phase out infrastructure and not to do demolition by neglect, where they refuse to actually invest in that infrastructure that people rely on. And the CPUC needs to continue to do their job holding them accountable for providing the services that they have already on the North Coast, but also expanding access so that people aren't left out in the cold in an emergency.
Thank you. Mike?
These same people that are trying to get that passed at the, California Public Utilities Commission are the ones that have been appointed by the current, legislature, current staff over a number of years. I have a landline in my house because I cannot use my cell phone in my own home. If I want to use it, I have to go out to the street to do it. And so I have a landline for these very reasons. Yes, I'm like Chris, I oppose it. We need that landline. There's no question about that with it. But when it comes down to who's going to control it, we keep giving it to regulators in the state of California. Look at what's happened to California over the last 10 years. Okay, these regulators are dictating everything that's happening without any experience, not knowing what it's like in these areas. Again, like Chris said, one size fits all. That's not going to change as long as we keep the same party in place. It's not going to change. You're going to get the same thing happening, just like it's been. You're going to get promises, but you're not going to get action. You need to go ahead and have somebody there that's not beholden to the other legislatures, not beholden to unions like California Teachers Association when they pulled Chris in to give an endorsement in the back room, when he was at the very bottom of the list at the very beginning for the primary, but yet they gave him the endorsement. So we need to go ahead and get these regulators out of our lives.
Thank you. Next question comes from Captain Paul Plakos. Paul is a captain at the North Sonoma Coast Fire District also. The Educational Revenue Augmentation Fund, which is generally referred to as ERAF, was created in 1992 to shift funds from counties, cities, and special districts to reduce the state of California's financial obligations to schools. The average ERAF shift from special fire districts, like ours here, in Sonoma County, the average is 5%. However, the North Sonoma Coast Fire Protection District, our local fire district, has an ERAF shift of 46%, which equates to $1.5 million annually. Our fire district sued Sonoma County to recalculate the ERAF, but lost. The district appealed and lost again. The only way to change this annual inequity is via legislation. Are you willing to carry legislation so that our fire district will have its ERAF shift adjusted in line with all other Sonoma County fire protection districts? Mike, I believe you're first.
Yes, I would, because I think that the funding for education right now is very unfair in a lot of different ways. We need to take a look at whether it's the LCAP, where they take a look at the flexibility that's given to school boards. We don't have that flexibility anymore that we used to have with it. And it's the same thing with the fire district. If they have to, pay that much, it should not be, that much of a difference percentage-wise between them. It should be the same. Because education, of course, is essential. And how are we going to fund that education, especially in the small rural districts? A lot of the rural districts are going broke. It's very simple. They just don't have the money. And just like the proposition on the ballot for the bond for schools, I'm against that because it's not going to do what it's saying. Most of that money is going to pay the interest on the previous bond. And it's not going to help small schools because that's designed to be matching funds. And unless you pass a school bond in your local area, you don't even qualify for it. So there are some real issues with the education, but I think it should be fair down the line. You cannot take one district, you know, and then go ahead and have another district have to pay so much different. Yes, I would be willing to really take a look at that.
Chris?
Yeah, I'd certainly be interested in sitting down and talking about what the impact of that is, why it was found to be that case. I'm all for equitable distribution of services and making sure that folks get their fair share, but without more of a context or more information, I won't commit to doing a specific piece of legislation, but I can commit to the overall intent of trying to make sure that they receive what they are supposed to receive, that they have access to the services that the citizens out here expect to be able to access.
Thank you. I might remind our physical members here, if you have a question which you've not already submitted, there are note cards and you can write your question down and it'll make its way up here. And should we have time at the end, we'll take questions from the audience too.
Just put your questions in the hat and we'll pull them out. This next question is from Scott Nevin. Many areas in California suffer from a shortage of affordable housing. Our community not only, okay, sorry, there's more tech stuff. Our community not only has that problem, but has the added impediment of dealing with the California Coastal Commission. This complicates matters with building the necessary infrastructure to house and educate the people who live here in order to service the tourism sector. What will you do in Sacramento to help alleviate the impediments to creating affordable housing for workers on the coast? And I think it's Chris. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the number one criteria, or the top three criteria for affordable housing, and the places that we really struggled, are the time, the certainty, and the cost of the development of that housing. Each developer, particularly if they're doing affordable housing, has millions of dollars of risk that they're putting out there anytime they start a project. And when you have jurisdictions that pull the rug out from under them or delay things substantially, it increases the amount of risk that they have and the amount of cost that they ultimately have. We see right now projects that penciled out 2 years ago when interest rates were really low now don't pencil out because interest rates are too high for developers to be able to move forward with a project. So looking at ways that we do our upfront community engagement and planning around housing needs and then facilitate a smoother transition into the actual groundbreaking for those projects is what's going to ultimately get housing, but especially for affordable housing, which already has really narrow margins to begin with. Before this, we were out taking a tour, and I had a chance to see Burbank Housing's housing units out here that they're in the process of potentially converting into for sale housing as opposed to rental housing. And we had a chance to talk about the impact that that will have on the local government, the impact that it'll have on your local businesses, that is a substantial portion of the workforce that needs to be supported and have access to housing. We'll continue to do that in Sacramento.
Thank you. Mike?
Yes. All housing is, you have to have a plan for now. And it's local community plans. In Santa Rosa, it's just, the city council, for Sonoma County, it's the supervisors. So plans have to be there and you have to meet certain requirements, just like Chris was saying. And part of the things that's happening, of course, is when people bring in their plans for different things for housing here, because of the cost of the permits, that doesn't make houses cheaper. In Santa Rosa, they got it on the ballot. They're going to raise the permit price. It's going to go ahead and cost more to build homes. That doesn't make it affordable. And that's what's been happening, is that homes are not affordable. It's very difficult to get an affordable home on the coast. This area itself. I mean, there are workers here, but where are they going to live? Most of the area is very expensive. It's just that simple. But it has to be on a local level first, say this is what we want. Then it should go to the county to help the county. Then go to the state level. But there are certain requirements that are necessary and required in order to put in affordable housing. We've seen a lot of groups get affordable housing money that haven't done it. And it's something that needs to be taken a look at. Where is all that money going that we're paying for some of this affordable housing that never reaches the people that's intended to help? Because the governor won't take a look and see what.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question was submitted by Barbara Schultz. Climate change is causing more severe weather patterns. Events such as wildfires, floods, bomb cyclones, atmospheric rivers, and thunder snow are becoming commonplace. Hurricane Helene has devastated parts of inland North Carolina, which is unprepared for such weather events. This causes billions of dollars of damage to our homes, businesses, and environment. Question is what will you do in Sacramento to address and help reverse our climate crisis?
I
Yeah,
I
I'm
do
sorry. Go
believe-
ahead, Mike.
I do believe that climate changes. Okay, but I think we're running scared. And what I mean by that is that we are being led by the far left saying, okay, all this stuff that's happening is because of climate change. It's not all because of climate change. Your forests are burning because we don't take care of, we don't manage our forests. That's one of the reasons. Okay, there's no question that climate has changed. It's going to continue to change. What am I going to do? I'll tell you right now what we have to do, which is the practicality of it, is we need to get fire insurance down. That's the practical, that's what I'm looking at. I'm a realist. Okay, am I going to be able to change what the weather is? No. Do we know what it is? As you look at all the statistics, Norway just came out with a new study that showed that all the CO, footprints are very inaccurate, and it's a government study that Norway just did. Okay, so what we need to take a look at is the things that affect us. I'm not here to take care of the nation. I want to take care of what's here. How are we going to go ahead and get the fire insurance because of these different things? How are we going to get the, flood insurance? How are we going to go ahead and protect those properties on the coastline, if something does happen? That's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at local things here that needs to be done. Okay, and there are a lot of different things that can be done, but I think the first thing is the losses out on the East Coast. Okay, it's simple because they don't have insurance anymore, a lot of them, the flood insurance.
Chris?
Yeah, so first of all, the insurance is a symptom of climate change. It's not the cause or lack of cause of climate change. There is no doubt when you look at the science that humans are driving climate change. It's making it so that our atmosphere, our climate is becoming more arid. It's leading to things like those two bomb cyclones that you mentioned on the North Coast 2 years ago, a whole bunch of rain at the same time. It's making it so that communities like Santa Rosa, like Paradise, have seen catastrophic wildfires. To throw up your hands and say that we have absolutely no obligation to it because we're localized here on the North Coast is a complete ignoring our responsibility, particularly for communities who have seen the sting of climate change, to say, well, that's a national issue, that's an international issue. We have an obligation to invest in the infrastructure that allows us to meet our climate goals. And that means to electrify things, that means to reduce our carbon impact, it means to focus on carbon sequestration, it means to focus on resiliency, it means to make sure that my neighbor who goes through a flood has the services that he needs or she needs, and that they're able to still survive in the community that they love. To just say climate change, wow, oops, that's not an acceptable answer when you live in California or when you live on this planet.
Thank you. Next question is from Linda McCabe. Reproductive freedom is more than just determining whether or when to bear or beget a child. It also includes deciding where to give birth and those attending births. California has become hostile to birth centers and midwives. At least 19 birth centers have shut down in California over the last 4 years, including last year, the Santa Rosa Women's Health and Birth Center, where Linda mentioned she gave birth 26 years ago. Here's the question. What will you do in Sacramento to ease the regulatory burdens on midwives and birth centers so that California women can have safe options when choosing where to give birth? Chris, I believe you're first on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the areas where Mr. Greer and I disagree the most. It is around access to reproductive choice. It is around access to care. When we did our forum about a week ago in Ukiah, I mentioned that one of the substantial issues that we have on the North Coast is that even if you now have an enshrined right to reproductive care in many parts of California, including the North Coast, you don't actually have access. And you have many religious-based institutions who have been moving into the healthcare field who are refusing to provide reproductive choice for folks. After we had that forum, a couple days later, the Attorney General actually sued a hospital in Eureka because they had deprived somebody of access to reproductive care, and they almost died as a result of that. This district means that you have to understand the nuances of rural health in the way that you try to allocate resources. I'm a big believer in universal health care. You ask what we can do to get more birthing centers, take the profit model out of health. The reason that you don't have them being able to pencil out in rural communities along the coast is because the folks who are providing the services are looking at where they can get the most profit, not where we have equitable distribution of health resources. You have to have universal health care to take profit out of healthcare if you want access in areas with fewer people.
Mike?
To start with, what happened in Eureka was absolutely wrong. I agree. It was not the way it should have been handled at all. As I look at it, it's not so much reproductive rights of women. To me, it's the health care for everybody that's here, for your children, for your grandparents. That's what we don't have here. It's just not about, abortion or birth. Okay, it's about care for all of us. That's what's needed here, and that's what we don't have. It was nice to see that the governor, they went ahead and signed the bill to give the hospitals an extra 3 years to get, set up for their earthquake conforming construction that they have to do. So that was good to see that. But we need to get more health care here. And as much as, Chris doesn't like to admit it, a lot of people don't do it out of the goodness of their heart. Okay? We like to think that. We don't have the doctors. We don't have the nurses. Okay, in the next 3 years, we're going to be short 200,000 nurses. Okay. We're going to be, by 2030, we're going to be short over 300,000 general care physicians because they're not going through school. What we need to do is start getting doctors. That's where the issue is.
Thank you. This next question is from Ken Rupnick. What are your plans to address progressive water shortages on the North Coast? And in particular, what are your thoughts on watershed restoration to capture more rain and ways to apportion stream pumping and subsurface well extraction? I think it's Mike, right? This next one?
Yeah. Okay, I think one of the big things that we're looking at right now is the state of California is putting the cart before the horse. It is making decisions on water such as Pillsbury Lake, taking it down. Of course, Chris is going to tell you, well, PG&E didn't want to do it anymore. Well, they didn't want to do it anymore. They wanted to get rid of it because the legislatures and the Public Utility Commission did not force PG&E to keep that electrical generation up to date and do that. So yeah, they want to get rid of it. And why would they want to put it in when hydroelectric is not considered green energy in California unless it's a certain size? We need to go ahead and have more storage. I have no problem with taking care of the streams we have. I'm in the outdoors all the time. That's what I do. The Klamath River, same thing. What they did, instead of, they took all the dams out at one time, but they didn't do it in a proper way. They put that cart before the horses. Instead of taking out all the toxic material behind the dams, they took all the dams out at the same time. Okay, this is what they're doing at Lake Pillsbury. Is that going to affect the water? It's going to affect Chris's water. Okay, over there. We need to go ahead and be able to do it. Unfortunately, there are organizations within the state. We have a water bond that we can actually go ahead and use to build other reservoirs. Okay. But they're not letting us use it.
Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. The number one way that we can address water shortages is something that's actually a proven technology that is also cheaper than what we do currently, and that's expanded access to aquifer recharge. Literally sinking the water back into our groundwater and making sure that then we can pull on that when we need to. If you look at the capacity across the state for aquifer recharge, it's about twice as much as the planned catchments that you have from the water bond or from other projects that are being pushed forward. Water is vital, especially in this district, And actually, if you look at the waterways, that's the way that California is connected from north to south. So making sure that, yes, we provide restoration projects that that have our watersheds healthy and able to flow is important. Make sure that we invest in aquifer recharge so that way we can store that water for when we need it. Making sure that we capture water, slow it down, sink it. Those are all things that are going to help California, where we know every single drop of water is going to be important moving forward because of climate change.
Thanks. This next question is from Debbie. Have either of you accepted any funds from PG&E, their affiliates, or nonprofits? In addition, she wants to know your positions on microgrids and alternative energy supplies. And Chris, then Mike.
Yeah, the answer is easily a no. I do not accept money from PG&E or other investor-owned utilities. In terms of microgrids, I think that particularly in places like Sea Ranch, that makes a lot more sense than building out broad infrastructure, allowing folks to have easier access to microgrids in areas that are harder to serve. We'll make sure that we have better infrastructure for folks and better redundancy and resiliency. I worked in the clean energy space on the finance side. I have worked on legislation in 15 states on renewable energy. I serve on the National League of Cities Energy, Environment, Natural Resources Committee, and I also was the chair of the Sonoma County Regional Climate Protection Authority as well. I'm on the board of directors for Sonoma Clean Power, and this is what we do: is we expand access to clean energy. We look at things like geothermal, we look at things like microgrids, and we figure out how we can piece together climate solutions that match what the need of the community is. Microgrids is a great technology to be able to do that. It needs to be expanded.
There's no question that microgrids are something that we need to go to, especially in the rural communities. And as you look at the different aspects of energy, one of the reasons we have such a high cost of living is because of the cost of energy. I was involved in the geo plants over in Lake County when I was on a city council in Gridley. I was our member to go ahead and do that, to go ahead and get involved in that. It's still expensive because those pipes corrode very quickly with it, so those have to be replaced all the time. And when it comes to alternative energy, I think it's fine. I loved it. The other day I was going door to door in Santa Rosa, and here's a EV being plugged in, and the people have, solar panels on their house. Super. I have no problem with that. What my problem is with alternative energy is the location they're putting it and the falsehoods they're telling about it. And I have not changed my opinion, and I see that the tribes, I've actually joined my opinion, the fact that the turbines, each of those turbines has over 200 gallons of oil in each one of them. And they're starting to see all the problems, and they want to put it out on our oceans. I want to see, how would you like to have some turbines right out here with it? And it's not even the physical thing. The thing is it destroys the environments there. But environmentalists, because it's green energy, they say, oh, it doesn't matter. We'll let the fish die. We'll let these things die. But we have to have wind energy.
Thank you. The next question is from Marcia Senator. This one is about Proposition 5, which is on the upcoming November ballot. Proposition 5 would lower the threshold for approval for local bond measures. That would lower it from 2/3 vote to 55% vote for local bond measures. What is your position on Proposition 5, for or against? Mike, I think you're next.
I am against it. It hurts the people that it's supposed to help. And that's how it really is. It's going to cost more for, the low income. It's going to cost them. That's the problem with, Prop 5. And with all the propositions, anything that's asking for money is going to cost more money. And the people that are going to get hurt aren't necessarily the people 3 blocks down with a house here. But it's going to be those, down in, Santa Rosa, in the low income areas. It's going to be those up in Crescent City where we have the lowest social economic area in the state of California. That's who gets hurt with these bonds. I am not in favor of that bond because it doesn't do it. And what it does is it puts greater debt on my kids and on their kids down the road, because most of these bonds and so forth are talking about 30 to 40 years before they're paid off. And they'll just write another bond to get money to go ahead and pay it off from that bond. So it just keeps going that way. I'm not for it.
Chris?
Yeah, to be really clear, Prop 5 is not a bond. Prop 5 lowers the voting threshold on local bonds so that local communities can make a choice for themselves whether or not they want to assess a bond. We saw in Santa Rosa in 2018, we had a housing bond specifically for affordable housing that got, I think, about 58%, 59% of the vote and failed. So you're telling me that 60% of people, almost 60% of voters, can agree on something and it still fails? That doesn't sound particularly democratic to me. And so all Prop 5 does is lowers the threshold and then allows local communities to determine for themselves whether it makes sense for them based on the needs in their community and based on the finances within their community.
But it does get you more bonds.
Thank you. This question is from April. How and on which issues will you work with legislatures from other parties and the Senate? Is it Chris first? Or
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. So that's one of the things that's really great about this district and really unique about this district. It is the third largest in the state. It is the highest concentration of tribes within the state. And it is one of the few rural districts within the state. There's a lot of crossover issues that it doesn't matter which party you are, that you have plenty of friends to be able to work with issues on, whether it's wildfire, whether it's rural issues, whether it's agriculture. You know, we've got this measure in Sonoma County, Measure J right now, that the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, almost every single elected official, most community groups are all in alignment on, because it's around agriculture and the nexus between agriculture and sustainability. There are many of those issues in this district that allow you to reach across the aisle, whether it's enhanced vegetation management. I would love to work with our land trust to make it easier for grazing to happen. That's a partnership with our local farmers. That's something that's going to matter to rural communities, which are typically more Republican in the state of California. So this district has the opportunity to really pull people in, be a consensus builder, and drive sustainable changes here in California.
Measure J is a good example. There's no question about it. I believe in no on J. There are a lot of things that could be worked on, but unfortunately, that's not the reality again. The reality is Democrats have a supermajority. It really doesn't matter what the other party wants. A lot of their bills, the legislatures get shut off at 30 seconds as you go down there and you listen to the different sessions because it doesn't really matter. What we need to do, and one of the reasons I'm running, is to go ahead and get away from that supermajority so that you can have those type of discussions. So you can have those things with people from the other side. You need that. But right now, it isn't happening. He can say all he wants about it. It's not taking place. They had over 2,000 bills that were written this past year. Okay, it's not taking place. It needs to happen. Measure J is one local. You do local ones. Anything on the state, forget it. Any statewide, it doesn't happen. That's the reality of what's taking place. It's because we are a single party state. That's it.
Thanks.
Thank you. I think this is our last question.
Are there any more
Are
questions?
there any
in
more
the hat?
coming?
We'll see what comes up. It's empty.
That's it. Then this will be our last question for you.
No. Asked Catherine.
Yeah.
Yeah, Catherine I asked her, you have none, correct? Might have some email questions, so let's go over what George has for you.
Yeah. Thanks for bearing with us this emailing and getting the questions and,
We look technologically advanced, but we're not.
There's two. I'm sorry, there's two.
But,
Well, let's save this one for the last one.
okay.
Okay.
This is about the Gualala Hotel. Gualala this is from Ann Shee Kent. Gualala is our local town. Thanks to all who are helping to rebuild the Gualala Community Center. We have someone here today, quite a few. The Gualala Hotel needs help too. A great historic meeting place at the crossroads of Sonoma and Mendocino, the The property has been flipped in recent years after closing in the COVID area. We need representation that will work with Mendocino officials to revive the hotel to serve the needs of our community. Thank you. Wasn't really a question. Any comments? Mike?
I think you're finding this in a lot of different coastal communities,
Yes.
whether it's Eureka or what, all the different places, you're finding a lot of these older buildings that people want to have there because they're historical, significance. But the fact of the matter is, some of these are so old, the cost to rebuilding them is extremely difficult to do that. And then what are you going to do? In Eureka, they're making a hotel. They decided to do it, and it caused a lot of fear over it because they wanted to put in some type of a shopping center where this old hotel was. And it's still going on. It's still in course. So there are a lot of things going on that, quite frankly, it's going to be local. That's about the only way it's going to be taken care of. Now, if you go through the Historic Society, through the state, through the nation, that's other ways you can go. But for a lot of the buildings on the coast that get destroyed because of, all the salt water and the winds and so forth, it's not feasible, quite frankly, to go ahead and do it unless you have a plan that you can make it economically feasible for that town, for the tourists. And that's what you have to do is, what's the plan for it, and go that way with it. And that's the first step.
Yeah, I'll use this as just sort of a broader nexus because I know that there's thousands of these issues throughout the district where folks are working on projects. And really part of the role of the legislature, the legislator who represents, is to help to enable, to work with the local folks who have a vision for what they want their community to be and make sure that they have the resources and the tools that they need to reach that vision. I know in that area in particular, Ted Williams, one of the supervisors, is very interested in investments from the state. I'm more than happy to work with community members and with the supervisor to make sure that folks have access to resources, whether it's that they hear about, whether it's support for grants, whether it's fundraising efforts. I think that that's a component of this job that, in particular, Senator McGuire's done a really good job of, is leaning in and helping people to reach that vision. And I look forward to being able to do that as well after November.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we are now down to our last question. And this one will be an appropriate one to end our time with for each of you. This question is from Catherine Conrad. Who do you support for President of the United States and why? Chris, your turn.
So not surprising, probably, Kamala Harris. For me, even if I wanted to just be simple with it, at its core, I'm a one-issue voter. Have you raped somebody or not? And former President Trump has been convicted of that. He is a stain on the office of the presidency. The way that he treats people, the way that he's tried to overthrow the local government and the national government, he has absolutely no respect for our institutions. Kamala Harris not only would be a good president, but I would vote for a ham sandwich before I would vote for Donald Trump.
This is a question that's pretty irrelevant because everybody knows right from the beginning. And so I think this is something that's one of the reasons people don't like to come over here, is because some of questions like this. I know this is very far left area, and I appreciate that. I will vote for President Trump. I have a hard time voting for someone when they haven't put forth any kind of plans, and the plans she has haven't been her own. Someone that's supposed to be helping down on the East Coast, what happened to that money? We put all that money, into illegal. They took it out of the FEMA and put it elsewhere. We're not helping our own people, and that's what happens right now. It's the same thing here. People are getting rich here. Our nonprofit people that are doing lousy jobs are getting money for it, and they're doing a horrible job. We need to look at the different nonprofits. The ones that are doing a good job, we need to fund those. We need to take away that money for those nonprofits that are a failure, and there's a lot of them with it. And there's a lot of hypocrisy that's going on. I am going to vote for Trump. I like his policies. I'm a lot better. I was a lot better off 4 years ago than I am now. And I guarantee you, I don't want to go under another Biden, Kamala, I don't want to go under that because it's going to make it a lot worse. You think you're paying a lot of money now? It's gonna go sky high. That's what's gonna happen. So there's no way that I could vote for her. Okay, and I don't believe in voting just because somebody is a woman or a man. I look at policies. It's that simple. What are the policies?
Thank you. Are
So,
you guys ready for?
As a follow-up, so how many people would Donald Trump have to sexually assault before you wouldn't vote for him?
Okay,
No,
Now-
we need to finish up. So you guys got your closing?
Paula's husband, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's get your
Let's,
closing
let's
remarks.
let each of the candidates make their closing statements, and we're going to allocate 2 minutes for each person for any closing statement, anything you wish to say. Mike Greer, I believe it'd be your turn.
Okay. The reason I'm running is because of the high cost of living. It's because of what's being done in the state of California. What's been done by the Democrats. They have promised you, how many times have they promised you they're going to help you do something and it doesn't happen? Okay, and that's what we're seeing. What we're seeing are regulators, whether it's Fish and Game, whether it's the Coastal Commission, we're seeing regulators determine what you're going to do in your life, determine what kind of house you're going to be in. We're seeing all this money. And Chris is a good example. He runs a nonprofit. He takes that nonprofit money, supports other organizations that go ahead and support other candidates. You know, he's standing for, Measure I, the healthcare. I believe in healthcare, but this is not to be able to do it because that 60% they talk about, that's after administration. That's not beforehand. And the fact that his mother actually is going to be profiting from one of those. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff going on that I don't approve of. These are things to be done. And I don't care if they're Republican. I don't care if they're Democrat. If they're doing things like this, we need to have them accountable. We need to be accountable for what's taken place. And I expect to be held accountable for it. And that's something that in the state of California, it's not. Democrats are not held accountable for some of their unintended consequences that are going on. And that's what you're facing here. And in our rural areas are the unintended consequences of short-sighted Democrats that have a supermajority and won't listen to anybody else.
Chris?
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming to the forum. I understand when my opponent says that he won't vote for anybody who doesn't have any plans, and I look forward to his vote in November. Because all I hear in these forums is the Democrats this, the Democrats that, they do terrible things. Here's the reality. I'm a Democrat, and I'm a Democrat because I care about people. When we were rebuilding our community, when we were going through the pandemic, we invested in people. We did a first-time homebuyer program for low-income folks who couldn't afford to live in the community. We did 2 child care programs so that people could go to work and not have to worry about their kids. We did a guaranteed basic income program for low-income folks who are struggling to live in our community. We made sure that we leaned in and invested in people. And yes, that's what I do as a Democrat. I care about the outcome, not just for my own family, but for your family, to make sure that our communities have what they need to be able to be successful, that we actually put forward real solutions to things like climate change, that we put forward solutions around health, that we don't just throw up our hands and say, well, that state government, that federal government, what are you going to do about it? I'm running because I want to make a difference in this community. It's where I was born. It's where I'm raising my son. It's where my wife and I fell in love. I care about this district. That's why I'm running, and I would be honored to have your support.
Well, thank you both for coming today. And thank you everyone who has come to participate in this important debate for our upcoming election. Hopefully it will help you determine which candidate to support. This meeting has been recorded and will be made available online on YouTube in a few days. A notice will be sent out to the mailing list. So if you are not already signed up for that, you can either do that on the sign-up sheet in the hall or send an email to thesearanchforum@gmail.com asking to be added to the mailing list. A reminder that there is a reception being held at the Del Mar Center across the way after this meeting, but first there is a tradition for the Sea Ranch Forum, which is putting away the chairs to assist our facilities and resources crew. We'll let you guys slide. Thanks for coming.
I'll still help.
the savior. done. Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, it's not. I asked that question because I know that your support.
We look technologically advanced.
What?
We look technologically advanced. We're not.
Or not? No.
He is a rapist. No, I am not. No. And how dare you say that